Welcome to That One Show. Today we're going to talk about Nephilim.
Nephilim. Yeah, that's what we're talking about today.
I'm going to say Nephilim. You can tell me I'm wrong, but I'm saying Nephilim the whole time.
I don't know how to say it.
Let's just switch it every time that we say Nephilim. 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 And then the Nephilim, they were the great men of old. Not to be confused with the Nephilim.
Well, on my handy dandy.
The Nephilim, if you're British.
Nephilim. Is that like aluminium?
Aluminium.
The Nephilim. My computer over here should.
Let me just finish up my maths class and then I'll go study the Nephilim.
Nephilims.
Said in the worst British accent in the universe.
The Nephilims.
Okay, but seriously, we're talking about... Are we just going to say Nephilim?
I don't care. Nephilim. I don't care. We've always said Nephilim.
We've always said Nephilim.
I mean, at the end of the day, does it really matter? If people know what we're talking about. We're talking about in Genesis
the word
6.
That is spelled N-P-L-F-Y.
N-E. You forgot the E.
G. Nephilim. Genesis 6.
1 through 4.
If you're still watching, maybe we have something important to say. But okay, let's talk about the Nephilim.
I'm not entirely sure I'm still watching.
So Angels and Demons Part 2.
Yes.
And as we really looked into it, we kind of decided that we were just going to end up talking about Nephilim the whole time. So this is just on Nephilim.
And truthfully, we say Part 2. This could probably be easily 3 or 4 different shows on Angels and Demons. So stick with us. We will record them as we see fit because we're in charge and this is our show. But beyond that, there's a lot to talk about here. There's every discussion about angels and demons from a biblical perspective will end up at some point discussing the Nephilim. So should we? Who are we talking about?
So let's read the passage where the Nephilim were first referenced.
Yep.
And this is found in Genesis 6. When human beings began to increase in number on the earth and daughters were born to them, the sons of God saw that the daughters of humans were beautiful, and they married any of them they chose. Then the Lord said, "My spirit will not contend with humans forever, for they are mortal. Their days will be 120 years." And here we get to the Nephilim. Verse 4. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of God went to the daughters of humans and had children by them. They were the heroes of old, men of renown. Okay.
So there's a whole lot to unpack there. I mean, I've read this a few times, and what's awesome is we could literally spend hours talking about, for he is flesh, his days shall be 120 years. I'm going to just open this rabbit trail just for a second. If you look at all the advances in human and medical technology, has any human being lived beyond about 120 years ever?
No. Not since those days, back when they used to live to like 900 years.
Yeah, Abraham and Noah, old guys.
Well, Abraham didn't live that long.
Yoda ages.
He lived longer. Well, if you look at the ages in the Bible, they lived to what?
Was Seth a Yoda?
This is baby Yoda.
This is the way.
Isaac is the baby Yoda. He's the promised son.
Oh my goodness.
Okay,
we just tied the Bible to Mandalorian.
Baby Yoda.
Nerd alert. You need to flash it. Nerd alert.
Just put it up on screen. In fact, on Chad's face is going to be Baby Yoda the rest of the whole show. It's just Chad's. It makes it more bearable.
I'm okay with that.
What were you even saying? 120 years.
Nephilim. It was verse 6:3. Yeah.
So what happened is before the flood, we got Methuselah. We have Adam. I mean, they list years, besides people that died younger or like Enoch were just taken up by God, there were people living to 900 years, 900 and some. Methuselah is what, 965?
Something like that, yeah. It's nearly
and Adam was like 935. I'm probably a few years off.
Could you imagine living a millennia?
That's a very long time. And in my current state, I would not want to. I already feel broken. Yeah, you just got to make it till you die, guys. But then what happened is the flood happened, and people talk about the scientific reasons and why this happened. But after the flood, people lived less long. We can see that there are people that live longer than our lifespans for a little while after the flood, but it quickly diminishes to where almost everybody lives under 100 years. And then we get to today, when the average lifespan is 87-ish years, and the oldest people on Earth that are validated are always right around 120 years, 122, 123, and they even have difficulty validating their birth years many times. People, some people think, so 122 days is the oldest confirmed individual. So,
which cracks me up, because science would say, oh, we can.
And it's a woman. God said man's days would be numbered. Men are at 116.
Yeah, so we're behind them.
So we're behind. Well, yeah.
And that fits what we know about women typically do live longer than men. That's typical.
Yeah, I'm kidding. Of course, man would be men and women. But
yes.
But anyway, okay, so that's that. Men, their days will be 120 years. So let's get, okay, now we're to the Nephilim.
Wow, let's get to the Nephilim. So here we go. We have our senior pastor, Nathan Bentley, is awkwardly creeping in the window.
Extremely awkwardly creeping. And he's not going to stop.
Oh, my word. This is just so creepy.
I have a secret theory that he's a Nephilim.
Well, he's kind of gigantic.
Don't tell him. He doesn't watch our videos, so he won't ever find out.
No.
Okay, so the Nephilim. There's a bunch of ways that you can take this, and I have watched endless amounts of video.
Yes.
And so we're not going to be able to get into all the different verses and all the different references and things that people link and end times and flood. We're not going to be able to get into everything. We're just going to give overviews. Yes, 100% correct. So first thing that people,
and I mean, truthfully, okay, so our heart, and I've said this a bunch of times, but our heart is, as pastors, that we put things out there, we give you an overview, we give you a little bit of basic information, but the heart of any pastor should be that we're going to give you enough to get you excited and get you interested in studying this stuff for yourself. And you should do that. You should look into this stuff. Don't take what we say as gospel truth, unless we're preaching the actual gospel, which is true. But on stuff like this, that we're literally getting into some pretty decent speculation in some areas. Don't be divided on this kind of stuff. This is not the stuff to divide on. This is interesting. This is fun to talk about. We've talked about it before. But our heart as pastors is that you...
Yeah, and the Bible is very clear on that. I mean, even Paul references this twice.
Yep.
In 1 Timothy. The first time in 1 Timothy 1, verse 4, he says... Well, starting in 3, as I urged you when I went into Macedonia, stay there in Ephesus so that you may command certain people not to teach false doctrines any longer, or to devote themselves to myths and endless genealogies. And he continues to go on that these things are just speculation. And while you may be interested, don't devote yourselves to them, because you have something so much more important that you do know, and that is Jesus. Right. And then he also says it in a very similar thing in 1 Timothy 4. Verse 7.
And new believers, if you're newer to this stuff, don't let this stuff overly influence what you think about. John's gospel is a great place for new believers to spend a lot of time. And to my recollection, I don't even think angels are mentioned outside in too much detail. So this is stuff for more mature believers. As you mature, these are the kind of questions that are going to come to you naturally. And that's cool. That's good. But again, this is stuff that, I mean, Paul even says such things promote controversial speculation.
Yeah, and so we'll reference this in the future. There's different categories of things, and if you imagine it in a circle, and then the circle extending out, different rings.
I have just gotten the best text we've ever seen.
What?
The chili has arrived.
Chili has arrived. Chili every day.
What's that? Chili.
Chili every day. Okay, so. Oh my goodness, I totally forgot what I was saying now. My brain is just so excited about chili. I hope he has sour cream.
Controversial. We could talk about the validation of sour cream or no sour cream in chili, because I think it's gross, but that's me.
Yeah, well, I don't know if I want to do this show with you anymore.
I don't eat a lot of dairy anyway, so ice cream. I do ice cream.
This is awkward.
I don't know if I could put ice cream in chili, though. That would be gross. Or would it?
All right, that's it. I'm out.
Show's done. Sorry. We made it 5 episodes. I just got a text from Joe saying our friendship is over.
Oh, that's right. I was telling about the circle thing. So at the very center, we have the things that are absolutely necessary for salvation, for your core beliefs. This is anything to do with Jesus, anything to do with what is necessary for you to understand, to believe in Jesus. And then once you go outside of that, that first circle is where you get things that are important, but not necessary for salvation.
Right.
And I'd say a large majority of the Bible falls into that. Yeah, so we got essential for salvation. Right outside that, we have essential for orthodoxy.
Doctrine and so consistent teaching.
Important, and most of the Bible would fall into this, where even if you didn't understand it, you could still understand who Jesus is and salvation and that kind of stuff.
Right.
But
and this is where a lot of skeptics like to spend a lot of time saying, well, yeah, the Bible says this, but in these sections, it's not clear about these things. Great, cool. If I took that completely out, does it change the gospel of Jesus Christ at all? The answer is usually no. Right? Why does God give us these things? I don't know, he knows us, so he knows that these are things that we're going to be interested in. He knows, and these stories do tie together. I mean, Paul and Peter and Jude, as we'll get to in just a second, are referencing back to Old Testament stories. Paul references back to Old Testament stories. We're dealing with the Jewish people, right? So it's important to keep these things in context, and that's why God gives them to us. But we should not be divided on them. We shouldn't. Anyway, these are things that are not that we shouldn't.
So moving out of the circle, then we have important but not essential. In fact, I'm just going to put this on the screen. Here it is.
That's right. Yeah.
Important but not essential. Next is not important, and then the outer circle is pure speculation, which might even fall into. It's even beyond not important. So what we're talking about today is going to fall in the outer 3 rings. Some of it will fall into important but not essential, but most of it will be not important and or pure speculation. And that's what Paul is warning against. Just don't get hung up on it, okay? So if you're interested, think about it, move on. So let's talk about it then, because I find it very interesting.
Oh, as do I.
The Nephilim.
So there's 3... main theories about who we got to back up, right? So we got to back up to the sons of God, right? The Nephilim, because this is one of the theories about who the Nephilim were. I'm referring to my notes, right? So were they offspring, which is plural by itself. What's a plural? Offsprings?
Yes.
Is that even anything? English major here. But anyway.
Just like peoples is the word.
Peoples? My peoples?
Yeah. Even though people is plural, if you're talking about groups of peoples, that's peoples.
Peoples is.
Peoples. All of the peoples.
And the possessive of the group of peoples would be peoples is.
Yeah.
I don't know. All right. Speaking of absolutely not important. Anyway, so the idea, a couple of the interpretations are that Nephilim are offspring of angels and women. And human women.
And I'd say that's probably the majority of what people believe when they read it. I mean, it says, the Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterwards. When the sons of God went to the daughters of humans and had children by them, they were the heroes of old, men of renown. And when you read it like that, it the way that we would write it, if I wrote that, I would mean that the Nephilim were the children, that they were the offspring of that. If that's how I wrote it, so that's how most people read it. And if you go down that rabbit trail, then that means a lot of different things. That means that these Nephilim are half human, half fallen angels,
right?
And
which seems to, even though this is the general belief or speculation about this, there seems to be some challenge with that idea that angels and humans can procreate. There are challenges with that, right? Like saying that, we know that a lion and a tiger can procreate because they're both, feline, but a lion and a bear can't procreate because they're different kinds.
Now, we do know that they had children with them, but we're just talking about
who they were,
whether or not the Nephilim
are
those children. And so if you go down that road, that the Nephilim are the children, and
but some people do hold that angels can't have carnal relations. That they don't. That's not possible.
Correct.
Based on
now, we do have the book of Enoch, which goes into more detail about what happened, that the Nephilim were the offspring, and so if you go into that, but there's reasons that's not canon in the Bible, that people rejected it. There are definitely issues with Enoch. So whether or not that's true, okay,
Enoch does fall in. The majority of Enoch is pure speculation. That there's not a whole lot of. There's a reason it's not canon.
Yeah, and we were just watching a video where the guy was talking about how when Paul talks about not focusing on the mythologies. Now, I don't know how he got this information or what he's referencing, but he's saying that he's literally referring to the Jews obsessing over the Nephilim and
Enoch
and the ties to Satan and all these different things and the genealogies and what that means. And I've watched a lot of videos on, if you search YouTube, you can find them about how, the flood was all because they wanted to destroy the Nephilim, and that the bloodline of humans was tainted and God had to get rid of it. And then all these other events that have happened, and they lead into...
We have to go backwards. And so to back up, we go Genesis 6:1 and talk about the sons of God. And the sons of God is what we're talking about. Who are the sons of God? Every biblical reference, and there's only 5, every biblical occurrence of the term son of God or sons of God refers to angelic beings. It's not disputed. That is, if you break it apart, and they are Genesis 6, 2 and 4, Job 1:6, 2:1, Job 38:7, and Daniel 3:25. Those references are all to angelic beings of some sort. So that's why we can assume that in Genesis 6:1 or 6:2, when it says the sons of God saw that the daughters of man were attractive, that was angels looking at human women saying, "Wow, those they're pretty good looking."
Yeah, and I know off the top of my head, the only one that I know the exact wording of it off the top of my head is the Daniel passage, and that's with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego.
Now we have people tempting us at our studio door with bowls of yummy chili.
We will resist, and then we will eat it. Absolutely.
I rebuke you.
We will eat it.
You are a stumbling block to me. See, I'm a fat guy, so any fat guy with food in front of him, that is a stumbling block. Anyway, sorry.
So
we shall call this the show of tangents.
Yeah, so look into it yourself if you want, but every time that sons of God is referring to angelic beings, and what that's debunking is the belief that these Nephilim are
human,
or that these children. Okay, we're mixing up all these different things, but they're the children of these people are the descendants of Seth and not of spiritual beings,
right? And where that comes from is sons of God. Adam is never referred to as a son of God, but the theory is that because Abel was killed by Cain, and the next down in the lineage from Adam and Eve was Seth, that Seth's children are good, godly in the tradition of the faith of their grandfather Adam, where Cain's progeny are not good, and that at some point, logic would say that Seth's children had to marry Cain's children, in which case those were then Nephilim and evil creations or beings rather. But
again, speculation, but it doesn't make sense with the way that
I don't think so either.
That phrase is used throughout the rest of the Bible.
I can see where somebody would get that from, but then when you start to put the rest of the Bible in context with it, it just doesn't fit. It doesn't make sense. Adam is never referred to as a son of God. Which would hold true that the sons of God is speaking about angelic beings, because Adam is never referred to that way. Why? He's not an angelic being. He's a human.
So then we go into the next view that you could have, and that's that the Nephilim were already there, that they were already there in those days. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterwards, when the sons of God went to the daughters of humans and had children by them. They were the heroes of old, men of renown. And now in this context, it's more of a nod to the audience, to the people that would be reading this, of like what kind of time period this is.
Right. And so you're making a really good point. Anytime we read scripture, anytime, we have to take off our contemporary lenses and put on ancient lenses. And what I mean by that is we have to look at what we are reading in context of a Jew in 3000 BC reading these writings of Moses, what would they understand this as? And if they were familiar with who the Nephilim were, which is where Joe is going, there's no need to further explain them. The speculation that we have nowadays, 5,000 or 6,000 years later, is because we aren't familiar with these things. But if I'm a 3000 BC Jew, I know who these people are.
Yeah, which is interesting because in this circumstance, then we still don't know who the Nephilim are.
Right.
And the thing is, if you look into the way that it's worded, and the way that just the way that it's written and the way that it's worded and the intended audience, it is an extremely probable, if not the most probable way to interpret this, that the Nephilim were already there. Then that this stuff happened with the fallen angels, and they went into the daughters of humans and had children by them, and then the Nephilim were there afterward as well. And it's just putting it in context of the situation of what had been going on at that time.
And the position of one person the video we were just watching, who was a PhD at Southern Seminary, is that the Nephilim, if we think of the tales of like Gilgamesh and the men of great renown, who some skeptics against Christianity and against Jesus Christ making the claims that he did say, oh, well, Gilgamesh made the same claims. Okay, that's fine, but no point did Gilgamesh. I don't know. Anyway, but if you unpack the story of Gilgamesh and that he could have potentially been a Nephilim, right? That this was this great, man who acted and behaved like a god, humongous human beings, which for
the thing
a Jew in 3000 BC was probably like,
if we take it in this,
Nathan.
Yeah. If we take it in this way of viewing it, then now we're left with two things that we still don't know about.
Mm-hmm.
We're left with the children
mm-hmm.
of the daughters of humans and the sons of God, and then we're left with the Nephilim. So now we have two things that we don't know about. Now, the interesting thing is, right after this, God is so displeased with the world that he sends a flood and destroys everything. So are these things connected? I would have to say that in some way, yes, they are.
Right. And if you look at, I think and this is now I'm really going to, but this is my speculation, is I think if you look at, again, what you said, if you look at verses 5 and 6, the Lord saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every intention of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. Moses is literally saying there was nothing good in any human being. Mm-hmm. Like we were wretched things,
except for Noah,
and we have to keep reading to get to that point. And then the Lord regretted that he had made man on the earth, and it grieved him to his heart. That verse by itself is so full of there is so much in verse 6. It's for me, it's comforting knowing that God had regrets. Does that mean that that somehow, some way, what God didn't make or what God made was not good? No, everything God does is good because he is good itself. But that doesn't mean that he can't have regrets. Does that mean it was a mistake? No, not necessarily. I regret not retiring from the Navy. Was that a mistake that I didn't retire from the Navy? No, I just regret not doing it. Why? Well, it's mostly materialistic and prideful, which is probably why it was a good thing I didn't do it.
But it was obviously painful to him to see that what had become of it. And like I said, it's hard to imagine that these things aren't connected, that we aren't given this information and then told right afterwards about that God had, God said, for I regret that I have made them, but Noah found favor in the eyes of the Lord.
That's verse 8.
Yeah, so it's literally right after we're told about the Nephilim and the sons of God and the daughters of men having children. So something was going on there.
But I think what that points to is the entirety of things. Right. So if you have these great heroes of renown, which means well known in that time, people knew who the Nephilim were. They were heroes. They weren't all bad guys necessarily. Right. But God is saying, no. Everything on the earth, even these heroes who you think were good, all of it is evil. You guys are, all of humanity is evil. And this is just something that as I'm reading this right now, I was like, well, that would make sense. That's why this footnote about the Nephilim exists, because perhaps at the time the Jews and the Israelites in that time and humanity at that time looked at these as great men, right? They were heroes of renown. They were mighty men, who've been there for a long time, and they were there before the angels polluted humanity, and they were there after it. They've been there the whole time, and guess what? They're wicked too.
So then let's go into the New Testament and hear from Jesus, because then you would say, well, doesn't it say that angels can't procreate? Mm-hmm. Isn't that something that we believe? And so let's look at that passage with Jesus, because they try to entrap him, and they try to get him to answer a question in a way that they want him to answer. Mm-hmm. And they ask him, if are you pulling it up?
Mm-hmm. So one is Matthew 22:30, and the other is Mark 12:25. So at the resurrection, people will neither marry nor be given in marriage. They will be like the angels in heaven.
Okay.
People have misinterpreted this verse in about 1,000 different ways.
It's really interesting because they will be like the angels in heaven.
So there, go ahead.
Yeah. So first of all, we're talking about angels in heaven. Mm-hmm. So yes, we will be like the angels in heaven are not given in marriage, and they are not procreating. But what did these angels do? Well, they're fallen. They went to earth. They left the place where they should have been. So they already are sinning.
And so where he's getting this is Jude 6:6. And the angels who did not keep their positions of authority, but abandoned their proper dwelling. Right?
So they were supposed to be in a place, heaven. Mm-hmm. They left that. And then they went and they procreated with women on earth. So that doesn't go against what Jesus said, because they will be like the angels in heaven. We will be like the angels in heaven, right. Not the ones that are on earth and we're sinning.
So this there's more to this. I think people get wrapped up in the angel part of this in verse 30 in Matthew 22:30, where our focus should be on the first part. At the resurrection, people, us, humans, will neither marry nor be given in marriage. Well, why? The vows we take based on biblical truths about marriage is till death do us part. The marriage is valid and binding as a covenant until death. Why? Because after death, there is no more marriage.
Yeah, and so Jesus is not answering a question about angels and demons. He's answering a question about us and about the resurrection. And some of the people asking this question did not believe in a resurrection. And that's part of the question they were asking. But you feel free to go look into that more if you would like. But
and Mark 12:25 is a parallel of Matthew. It's almost the exact same wording. When the dead rise. Right.
But the thing is, you have to look at it in the view that the Bible says that the sons of God came and did this and had children. That's not debatable. It says that, mm-hmm. right, in Genesis 6. So you either have to throw out Genesis and to believe different things, or you have to read both these verses in a way that they make sense.
Now, one thing
you absolutely can do
ancient Christians and Jews have done, more so Christians, ancient Christians have, because of these verses, blamed human sin on demons. And that is also inconsistent with the rest of Scripture, saying, no, our sin is not because of demons. And I think even contemporary Christians get wrapped up in this. They blame the devil and his minions way too much for the bad things they do and the stupid choices we make as humans.
Yeah, I mean, Adam and Eve did not have to sin.
No.
Satan did not force them to. He just offered it, and they took it.
Which is basically what happens to this day. Now it's my wife at the door.
We are so popular.
She's
also tempting us with food. Except that's like, what is that?
No. It's eggs.
Oh, it's eggs.
Oh, well.
It's an egg bake.
Okay.
So it's not so much of a temptation.
It looks cakey.
So this is
chili and eggs.
We have spent. So we are in our secret bunker in the unknown location at Life Point Church in Santan Valley, Arizona. And
Chad.
Oh, dang it. But we spend a lot of time in this room. It's kind of our office, and we don't get interrupted at all normally. But today has been a unique day where it's continuous interruptions, which is odd, but okay. I'm going to give in to the temptation.
The people love us. Let's just give them what they want.
They want us to eat.
They want us to, eat. We do work at a church, so if you don't want to gain weight, don't work at a church.
Oh my goodness. Some people say that the evangelical Christian movement has the Eating Your Way to Jesus program. But I do want to include this information here. So 2 Peter 2 and Jude 6 and 7 talk about, they're both related to each other, and they are in no way disputable. Referencing back to Genesis 6. They are talking about the angels who sinned, and the angels who did not keep their positions of authority. Then he talks about Sodom and Gomorrah and sexual immorality and perversion. This fits the narrative of Genesis 6 perfectly, saying sexual immorality, bad decisions, weird and unnatural things were going on. Yeah, that was these angels who left their positions. I'm not going to use the term fallen angels because they may or may not fit into that definition, but they left their positions of authority in heaven because they were enticed by the beauty of human women and went down and did sexually perverted things with them. Not necessarily like, as we would say, like sexually perverted. I mean, they may have, but it was a perversion of sexuality in the fact that they were having sex with human women. That was a perversion. I think this speaks to...
Well, I mean, if you look at the way that the Bible talks about any sexual perversion, I mean, bestiality and all these different things, it's all the same thing. And the times that God has just destroyed things, I mean, Sodom and Gomorrah, same thing. And if you look at it in the context of the flood, if the whole earth was like that, good gravy. No wonder God regretted and then just destroyed the whole thing and started over.
Yeah, and again, it doesn't mean that because of our free will, because of our choices, the perversions that we ended up making as a humankind before Noah and after, just because God is regretted at making it and is grieved by it, does not mean it is imperfect or wrong. It doesn't mean that. Nothing God does is wrong. It just means, again, that what ended up happening is he regretted it wouldn't have happened that way. That makes complete sense. His wish for us, God wishes that none would perish, that we would all be saved. His wish for us, if you can follow that and say his wish for us is that mankind would never have screwed up to begin with in the Garden of Eden. That is what God would prefer, and he regretted that we didn't do that. Does that mean we were? No, that's just the way things panned out. He knew it would happen that way.
You're trying to answer like the most difficult question ever right now.
I know, but it's really not that difficult.
but it also is.
I know.
Yeah. So here's the thing. I don't know if we're actually going to answer any questions about the Nephilim. But we just wanted to talk about it, and
encourage you to go out there and study it yourselves. But please do. It is interesting.
I think that when we get to heaven and we get to talk to God and talk to other believers, and we won't have all knowledge, but we will definitely have access to more knowledge.
For sure.
It's going to be an amazing thing to look back and see the story that God has written and this tapestry that, like, we'll look back and we'll be like, I can't believe we didn't see that.
Right.
And
we're gonna look back at Scripture and go, that is plainly obvious, and we overthought it to the nth degree.
Yeah, I mean, when Jesus is talking about end times, what does he tell his disciples? He tells them, like, you need to be on the lookout for this and on guard in this, but don't worry about it. And he gives them barely any information, and he says, just don't worry about it because you'll know it when it comes. And so all this stuff with angels and demons, and then moving into end times, and how that ties into Nephilim, and how that ties into Satan and fallen angels and all those different things. It's just, okay, it's interesting. Keep an eye out, but focus on Jesus is the end thing. And I think that when we get to the end and we see that this marvelous story that God has created, our minds are gonna be blown, which is why I find it so interesting right now, because all of this ties together, and God just doesn't want us to know everything. He gave us a lot. I mean, the whole Bible is chock full of things, and I was reading an interesting thing in First Peter that we're not going to talk about because we don't have enough time. But
here's why we're not supposed to know everything. Our salvation is based on grace, so that no one can boast. If we had extensive and exhaustive knowledge, we would be able to boast in our own knowledge and our own understanding of things.
And we're humans, so we would absolutely do that.
I think this is one of the reasons that the Bible is unique among even religious texts, but all books ever written, and people get wrapped up in this. Well, it's inspired, and the routes of transmission and translation. Well, why didn't God write it himself? I mean, the Quran, the Muslims, the claim about the Quran is that is literally God's words himself. Muhammad had nothing to do with it. He was just the vessel, essentially, right? Where the Bible is not that way. The writing styles, the personalities, the insights of the men who wrote in the Bible, God allowed that to happen. Why? Because if the Bible was that way, we would worship the Bible. We don't have the original, the autographs of the scriptural writings. Why? Because if we did, we would worship them. We would worship the autograph, the original copies, for lack of a better word. We only have manuscripts. Why? Those aren't worthy of worship. But if we had the original, the piece of paper that Paul wrote on, we would worship that. We would not worship the content
There
therein.
definitely would be people that would do that.
Absolutely. I think that's, and God knew
You
that.
know, we do have some of the Bible that God directly wrote.
Yeah.
I mean, we have the Ten Commandments.
Mhm.
God literally wrote that.
And I can make an argument that some people kind of worship them.
Oh yeah, well, the writing on the wall with Daniel, the meanie. I don't remember what else it said, but that he literally wrote God's hand came out of the wall and wrote on the wall.
Those are exceptions, though.
Yeah, no, I mean I can't think of anything else besides that. But
Well, I think
we're going to wrap this up.
Yeah.
So thanks, guys. Comment and subscribe. And as always, we'd love to get your questions and we'd love to answer them. And more than anything, go read the Bible for yourself. Yeah. That's it. Thanks, guys.